Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings and St. Johns County, Florida, over a century ago. These are stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So sit back and enjoy as I share with you a few of the stories from this week in 1920. The second week of the 1920 potato season has been marked by varying prices, with a general downward trend as was expected. The week opened with prices at $15, $12, and $7 for number 1, 2, and 3 potatoes, dropping steadily until the low mark was touched on Thursday at $13, $10, and $6. At the beginning of the week, prospects were strong for 100 cars a day shipments before the end. However, the rain Wednesday night, Thursday, and Friday changed the condition of things by slowing up the digging with consequent reduction in shipping. The work of preparing potatoes for shipment to market has reached what closely approaches its highest stage of efficiency at G.W. Waller Seneca Farm, where machinery designed and installed by Mr. Waller and thought to be the only machinery of its kind in use is being employed to great advantage. A barrel press with an estimated capacity of about 800 barrels a day, industrial railroad tracks, turntable, and other items form the main features of the equipment being used. The grater occupies a position at one end of the small industrial track, and that place is where all potatoes are brought for grating. As they come from the grater, they are taken in barrels which stand on miniature cars on the track. As fast as a barrel is filled, it is pushed along the track some 20 feet to the heading platform. The tracks and cars being so well constructed that a slight push will send either a loaded or empty car from one point to another. At the heading platform, the barrel is placed on a turntable, which is constructed to accommodate 2 barrels at a time, each of which is set on a circular iron base which holds it firmly in place, prevents it from slipping off, and ensures its arrival under the press exactly at the proper point. The press itself is operated by hydraulic pressure, the water for which comes from an artesian well on the farm, no pump, nor artificial fall being required to operate it. The simple throwing of a lever operates the press, bringing it down to the proper distance, but being so constructed to prevent it from going down too far or exerting too great pressure. 2 men working at the press are able to keep it operating steadily and to head the barrels in almost an incredibly short time. Potato thieves at work. Complaints are being made by Federal Point potato growers relative to the activities of thieves who are stealing barrels of potatoes from the field after the diggers have left for the night. On Thursday night, 6 barrels of number 1s were stolen from the field of Frank Gray, while a night or two before, a barrel was stolen from Roy Weber. It is also said that other similar thefts have occurred recently. Apparently, the thieves drive to the field with a light wagon. They load the potatoes and slip away into the darkness. As the theft of a half-dozen barrels of number 1s running at the present in the vicinity of $14 a barrel brings the theft into the grand larceny class, the thief will be up against real trouble when he is finally located. Road complaints and road work were also big topics of the week. Growers whose farm live along the sand road leading to Federal Point or who are obliged to move their crop over that road are making strong complaints regarding the shape in which that road now stands. The road is rutted deeply through a bed of soft sand several inches. Once in a rut, it is extremely difficult for a car to pull out in order to pass another car, and it is almost impossible for a loaded truck to do so. The bottoms of the ruts are so soft that in many cases it is necessary for a car to be thrown into low gear in order to come down the hill. To go up requires not only low gear, but marked skill on the part of the driver, a rabbit's foot, and the vocabulary of a mule skinner. How 2 trucks can pass at that point, or even a truck and a car, is a mystery. That they do contrive to get by each other is undoubtedly the result of pure luck, for nothing else would be of avail in that soft, sliding sandbank. Meanwhile, the long-promised work on the Hastings Road berms has at last commenced. Several carloads of rock had been received at the Spud siding, and the material was being transported to Deep Creek Bridge, where the berms on the Hastings side were receiving attention. Now to this week's Talk of the Times, where we take a look at what people were thinking and talking about over 100 years ago. This week's Talk of the Times is about the sad, non-existent state of the city's fire department. It reads, when he stated in the council meeting that the Hastings Fire Department is in deplorable condition, President Batchelder appears to have stated the truth. As a matter of fact, Hastings has no fire department, either deplorable or otherwise. Hastings has a fire engine, which is started at regular intervals to keep it in shape. But there is no man in this town whose duty it is to get that engine in operation in case of a fire, or to help man the hose lines. Should a fire break out, the Hastings fire apparatus must be made ready by volunteers who may or may not put in an appearance, and who may or may not know what they are about when they attempt to use the equipment to extinguish the fire. From all appearances, the condition of the Hastings Fire Department, or rather the Hastings Fire Protection, is not merely deplorable, it is desperate and dangerous. In its present condition, Hastings would be absolutely helpless in case of a big fire, while it's almost equally certain that there is nothing to prevent a small fire in the center of the business district from quickly becoming a conflagration that would wipe out the benefits of even such a bumper crop as is expected this season. And the reason for the state of affairs, as given plainly by former members of the fire department, is the owners of property in the town limits have time and again refused to support the fire department in any way, have done nothing to assist it, and have consistently repaid its best efforts under extreme difficulties with criticism and sneers. The matter can be summed up as outlined by a local citizen who is formerly prominent in fire department matters and who has given more time, thought, and energy to the furtherance of the fire department needs than any other man in this town. The fire department, that man states, has been allowed to die because it could obtain backing and support from nobody other than its own members. Those members were, with one or two exceptions, not property owners, but employees who supported it and worked with it, not for the protection of their own property, but to protect that of their neighbors and of the town in which they lived. As an example, he cites the case of the auditorium fire, which marked the final death throes of the local department. Up to the time of that fire, he states, the department had been gradually running to seed, its members becoming discouraged and dropping out one by one. When that fire occurred, the remnants of the department responded as quickly as possible. There were not men enough to get the hose to the fire and not men enough to hold the nozzles after the hose had been dragged into action. One nozzle was held by two men from out of town, strangers who just chanced to be spending the night here. Others were held by volunteers who appeared from time to time. The worst feature of the whole affair, in the eyes of the fire department members, was the fact that, with not enough men to fight the fire, and with the danger of that fire spreading to an adjoining property at any moment, men of Hastings sat in their cars at points of advantage and refused to help in any way. After such an exhibition on the part of their neighbors, the members of the fire department became utterly disgusted and virtually resigned in one body. On the day after the fire, there was not a man in town, so far as could be found, who would volunteer to help roll up and take care of the hose used. And C.W. Batchelder, formerly chief of the department, hired men with money out of his own pocket to do that work. Several times it is declared effort has been made to reconstruct the fire department and to build it up into an efficient public welfare organization. But on each occasion, the lack of cooperation on the part of the businessmen of Hastings has caused it to fail. Today, virtually every man who has been connected with the department at any time declares emphatically that he will have nothing more to do with it until it receives the support and interest of the local people at large and is not limited to a few men who get nothing but hard work and criticism for their pains. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. Now it's time for this week's musical memory when we listen back to a song that everyone was listening to over 100 years ago. This week's song is a 1924 tune that over the years has been recorded by many a famous artist in almost every decade. Tommy Dorsey in the 30s, Bing Crosby in the 40s, Doris Day in the 50s, Dean Martin in the 60s, right up to this past decade where it was recorded in 2015 by Seth MacFarlane on his album. But let's go back to the first vocal recording by Al Jolson back in 1924. Here's The One I Love Belongs to Somebody Else.
I'm unhappy, so unhappy, all I can see. The one I love don't care for me, and I'd be happy, oh so happy, but was fate, that it was too late when I happened to find her. The one I love belongs to somebody else. She means a tender song for somebody else. And even when I have my arms around her, I know her thoughts are strong for somebody else. The hands I hold belong to somebody else. While I bet they're not so cold for somebody else. It's tough enough to be on the shelf. It's worse to fall in love by yourself. The one I love belongs to somebody else. The one I love belongs to somebody else. Somebody else. She means a tender song for somebody else. And even when I have my arms around her, I know her thoughts are strong for somebody else. The hands I hold belong to somebody else, somebody else. I'll bet they're not so close to somebody else. When I make love, she's more like a pal. She calls me John, and my name is Al. The one I love belongs to somebody else.